Titanic Talk with Nelson Aspen and Alexandra Boyd. Here we feature stories from the independent documentary Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries, and everything else to do with the iconic ship. From James Cameron's epic groundbreaking movie to the history and legacy of Titanic herself. Join us and our special guests as we continue the 25th anniversary celebrations of Titanic. This is your first-class ticket to everything aboard the Ship of Dreams.
I am Nelson Aspen, and I am beyond excited that this is the very first episode of our new podcast, Titanic Talk. I mean, that is your first-class ticket to all things aboard the Ship of Dreams. And of course, the Ship of Dreams is none other than the Titanic. And my co-host is my darling friend of many, many years, Alexandra Boyd, who has the distinction of not only appearing in James Cameron's Titanic film, but being the director, writer, producer, and, for lack of a better word, host of a brilliant new documentary, Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries. So what better way to kick off all of our discussions about everything White Star Line than with Alexandra and I talking about her brilliant new documentary. We are going to christen our maiden voyage of Titanic Talk with a good champagne and or Prosecco. You can have your choice of good champagne or Prosecco. And let's say all aboard. And just as we saw Alexandra as the first-class passenger boarding the ship, still smelled of fresh paint with her dogs. Ladies and gentlemen, Alexandra Boyd.
Hello, Nelson. How lovely. What a great idea we had to just get together and talk about Titanic here on the year of the 25th anniversary of the launch of James Cameron's Titanic.
So many anniversaries when you think about it. There, you could fill 365 days a year with some kind of Titanic milestone, and there's such an unquenchable thirst for anything related to the actual historical happenstance or tragedy, or the film or subsequent spin-offs. And now we're adding the documentary to the sort of chandelier of all things Titanic. Tell our audience. Tell our audience.
Let's throw in a few French words as well.
With a good use of franglais, tell our audience how you came about putting the documentary itself together.
There was a number of sort of factors that came into play about 18 months ago, which was, here comes the 25th anniversary of James Cameron's Titanic. Roll back 25 years, and after the film won 11 Oscars and broke all the box office records, there was a group of us who'd been for a long time on the film I organized everybody to write a diary. Some people had written a diary, a very small amount, but then the rest of us sort of sat down and wrote about our auditions, wrote about first day on set, wrote about being in that tank for days on end, being on the poop deck. And the idea was to get a book published, but that was, 1998. There was no internet, there was no self-publishing. You had to go through a publisher, and, with many things, it just had sort of, that ship had sailed. So that was that. And I held on to all the PDFs of everybody's diary. And let me tell you, there were 29 of them, including my own. And I thought, there's got to be, here it comes. There's still people are so in love with the film. And then by association, of course, the history and the tragedy. And because of social media, I have connected with some wonderful fans, superfans, Titaniacs, as they call themselves, who not just know every single frame of the film, but have turned their lives into and their passion into something else that you'll see in the film. You'll see in the documentary Dale making his Barbie-sized miniature, exquisite museum quality reproductions of Kate Winslet's costumes, as an example, or Zach, who spends all of his spare money on the props and costumes from the film itself. So there seemed to be like this double set of stories that had to be dovetailed together into a love letter for the film, and that's what we've got.
There is a magic, thanks to social media, which, as you said, wasn't around when James Cameron's film was being made, that brings people together. You used to have to go to like a Comic-Con to meet like-minded people, you know, for your pop culture fix. But now with social media, all the Titaniacs are brought together, and it's been a treat for me as a Titaniac myself to get to interact with these folks, and I've met a few and look forward to meeting more. And now things like the podcast will open that even wider. But our friendship, which goes back almost 40 years, a lot of it has to do with my being a Titaniac back then. Before you got the part on the film, we don't want to spoil too much because that's part of the documentary as well. But it was my love for the Titanic story. When you came to audition for Titanic film, our friendship was very serendipitous for all of us sitting here today. Briefly, tell the audience about that.
Well, you've sort of teed it up perfectly. That's why I had to put you in the film as well, because we're all connected by the ship, by the film. And I remember casually mentioning at a party in your garden, oh yes, I've got this audition, and I'm playing, it's to play a part that doesn't really have any lines, but they've suggested I look up, the Countess of Roths. And you're like, the Countess of Roths, who steered the lifeboat of number 8. And I was like, what? I did sort of that like whiplash double take, what? And because you had a shelf full of videos and books and your lump of coal exhumed from the wreck, I could tell we had to sit down and work together on what I needed to put together for a monologue. And and it just going back to why the film exists, it seems like you mention Titanic to almost anybody and they have an idea or a thought or an opinion about it. And I still haven't quite put my finger on it. I think the question is still out there, but by the time you get to the end of the documentary, the question is still there, why? But at the same time, it doesn't matter because it's such a fantastic subject, such a fantastic thing to be passionate about.
There have been countless horrible tragedies over the centuries, but I don't know what it is about the Titanic disaster that seems to resonate universally. I think the first Titanic film was a silent German film, if I'm not mistaken, and it was from the point of view of the poor Germans on board the Titanic, but it was a silent film recreating the story of the Titanic tragedy. So I mean, it has been exploited for dramatic effect almost since 1912.
And I would like to say A Night to Remember, which I haven't watched all the way through for a long time, was an extraordinary film for the time that it was made. The horror and the terror really comes across, and I'm sure there were uses of models and they were on some in some tank somewhere, but it stands up to this day as
Yes.
a film that really and I remember it being on television when I was a little girl, and you just being totally feeling the peril of these people as their lives were slipping away from them.
And Night to Remember is a great example of, unlike James Cameron's Titanic, unlike the Clifton Webb, Barbara Stanwyck version of Titanic, Night to Remember has all the drama without fictionalizing. It's
Yes.
very true to is it Walter Lord's book, and it was kind of just the facts as they were reported to Walter Lord by the survivors. So it didn't have a Jack and a Rose. It didn't have a soap opera story. It was just a recounting of the disaster as it was relayed to the author and then translated to the screen. That said, when you look at dramatic interpretations like the Barbara Stanwyck version, the Catherine Zeta-Jones TV version, or James Cameron's version, it's the perfect backdrop for a Romeo and Juliet story or whatever other soap operatic devices you want to employ.
And to that, you know, when I first read the script of Titanic, I was like, what is going on here? Why? Because I had, you know, immersed myself in all these true stories. And as we know, I didn't play the Countess of Ross, but James Cameron said, oh, get her something else. No, I need people like that to, you know, pepper this ship with. And I had really immersed myself, and there were so many brilliant stories. And I was like, wait a minute, what's this? And it sort of took me aback, and could not have been more wrong about the outcome, since the people who saw the film when they were very young were drawn in by that Romeo and Juliet story. And that led to them finding out more about the ship and more about the real people. So it was this, whether it was intentional or not, it was a fantastic, dramatic choice to do that against all of the the purists who would say, just tell the real stories. And you know, it's all going on around those two young people. And it's brilliant. It's genius.
I wonder what it is. I mean, as a kid, I would play Titanic in the swimming pool. I remember reading Clive Cussler's book, Raise the Titanic, which was a fanciful fiction book about what if they were actually able to locate and raise the Titanic from the depths. They made a film version of that as well. But it created a lifetime fascination for me with all things maritime. Going on cruises, watching movies like The Poseidon Adventure that had something to do with tragedy at sea. And for all the cruising that I do, fortunately, I've never been in a disaster at sea, but I'm not afraid of it. I think I know how to handle it. And I think that the next logical step for us to do is to take your film, Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries, assemble the cast, and hit the cruise circuit. Because I've worked a few cruise ships as a singer and as an MC, and I think this would be a natural progression. And some of the guests that we'll have on upcoming episodes of the podcast from your gathered Titanic family, and some new family members that we've yet to meet as well, I'm sure. Who are some of the guests you'd like to see chat with us sometime?
Oh, well, first and foremost, as you said, some of the cast members. So let's sort of go through those. We've got Liam Toohey, who famously played the baker, who's on the back of the ship on the poop deck as it's going down, slugging on his father's hip flask. Liam, you know, a fine Irishman. We've got Mark Capri, who plays steward number 4, who gets punched by Rose in the corridor. He's trying to lead her up, and she's trying to go back down to save Jack. There's Rebecca Klingler, who plays the mother. Her title was Mother at Stern, and we just used to call her Rebecca Mother at Stern. Everybody was identified by their title.
Does she have children in real life? Does Rebecca have children? No. Oh, she would be a very stern mother, so it's probably for the best.
Well, she tells a great story about the little boy that played her little boy in the film. And who else? We have Judy and Ellen, who, to put us all to shame, were there longer than any of us. They were there, and they were core extras. They lived in San Diego. They hadn't met before they were on the film. And now, 25 years later, like bosom buddies. And they
explain what core background extras are for someone who might not know.
Yes, thank you. So you know, a lot of films have people, you know, in restaurants or on the street. You have to people your world with people you've paid. You can't just take literally people off the street. But when you do a big movie like Titanic, you need those people to be there a lot. You need them to recur, and especially with something like Titanic. They have to have or acquire certain skills, like floating in the tank or being strapped to the poop deck when it was at 90-degree angle. So they showed up, I think, just expecting a couple of days work, or maybe a couple of weeks at the most. But we'll ask them when they come on as guests. I think they were there for the full 8 months, and they became Simon Crane, the stunt coordinator. They became his favorite people, and James Cameron. You know, they they saw everything. They saw everything, mostly as third-class passengers. And Ellen distinguished herself by being that very tragic shot of the lady holding the dead baby in the water at the end. So that's her claim to fame. And then Judy is in every single other scene. And like, if you know where to look, and we found her in the documentary, we've found her and highlighted her and go, look, which is a little bit like my part as well, but that's half the fun of it too.
Well, yes, and that, I mean, in anything, seeing the little bits and bobs, which is what makes the documentary so brilliant, is that the Titaniacs, especially those coming back for a 25th anniversary screening of Cameron's film, you do know what to look for. And I recently saw your deleted scene, the scene where the ship has struck the iceberg and people are milling about the hallways, and there was a scene that was not in the final cut with you and presumably your husband, another gentleman coming out of your stateroom. Whether or not that was your husband could be a whole other movie. But with the steward telling you everything is going to be fine. But the gentleman in the next cabin that was milling around I recognized him immediately in that deleted scene, the gentleman with the beard and mustache, because he's all
everywhere.
over the film. He's everywhere in that movie. Talk about a core extra.
Yeah,
and I just have to say, because I love the steward spoke French to him. And I'm like, French? We never knew that this core extra that you see was a French character. So
or he just decided that he wanted to show off his French.
I recognized the steward from the scene where you board the ship. When you're walking onto the ship with your dogs, that's the same steward smiling at you as you're boarding the ship. With all the unused footage, there probably is. James, I don't even want to say it because he's probably going to release it for the 50th anniversary. It will be the 10.5-hour version of James Cameron's Titanic.
And the Titaniacs would watch it. I would watch it because I'd see all my friends doing all our little bits that never quite made it. But there was a lot of downtime as well. So there was a lot of filming, but there was a lot of not filming. So that's again how we all bonded as friends. I need to name everybody still before we finish. Linda Kearns played the third class woman. So I'd be like, Linda, third class woman. She'd go, Alexandra, first class woman. So that's how we met. And she's a big musical theater actress and star. And she was married off to the Irishman who plays the Ilian pipes in Gaelic Storm. So once they sort of put those two together, they're seen all over the place in different moments. Again, in that deleted scene where she gives Kate the blanket, and then as it's a deleted scene, you see Kate with a blanket. That's the other game the fans love to play, is like, oh, why does Spicer Lovejoy have a blood on his temple? Yeah. And I found that deleted scene where he chases them through the first class dining room and there's a bit of a scuffle with Jack and so forth. So the bits of the jigsaw puzzle that you can put together. So there's Linda, third class woman, and she's also another dead frozen body, so she went through all the makeup for that. There's Chris Anderson, who was a dancer, and they were all hired just to teach the core extras to the dances in the third class party scene. And he ended up standing in for Leo for a day, and he tells a wonderful story about that. Who else do we have? We've got Amy Guyper, who was Trudy Bolt, and hers is a lovely character, and the way she came by the role is just a great story. She was at drama school in New York at the time, and here she was on this huge movie, thinking it couldn't have been very important at the time, but then she got the shock of her life when she walked onto the set. And then famously within our group, Peter White, who played Third Officer Groves of the Californian, which was parked 10 miles away and could have probably saved everybody in the water, but they switched their wireless off and went to bed. And his scene was completely deleted. So he's actually he's our little ace in the hole, because very few people even know that Peter was in it, but we have him in the documentary to tell his story, which is great.
He's marvelous. Hearing all the stories are marvelous. Hearing from the Titaniacs is so much fun. And I especially liked listening to the casting director stories. Tell me about her.
Emily Schweber was an associate to Mally Finn. So she was tasked with finding not just the main characters, but these tens and tens of supporting roles that were stewards or first class passengers or third class passengers or Danish or Dutch or German or Italian, or they had to find, you know, the multiverse of people that would have been in and on Titanic. And she said it was quite, it was like no other job they'd ever done. And the Bible that came along with it was this thick, full of images and research that James Cameron had done. And I understand that, because that's actually part of the fun of putting a film together is oh, I want it to look like this. Oh, that's a good idea. Let's put that in the Bible. Let's make all of these ideas, you know, shake down into what the film is going to be. And for them, it was an incredible tool.
I don't want to give too much away from the documentary, but the audition process. You were tasked with writing a monologue from the point of view of a passenger. So I was fascinated by the stories of how she worked with actors and had such respect for actors.
Yes, and I think this film, I hope this film turns out to be something of an education for young actors coming into the profession. Like, this is what you can expect. There's just a very tiny percentage of actors that are lucky enough to be movie stars, and the rest of us are supporting characters, jobbing actors, and this is probably what your life is going to be. And it's not a bad life. It's hard, it's challenging, it has its ups and downs, but I think our range of actors really shows what being an actor, a successful actor, can be, because success is measured in different ways, right? There's a sort of educational element to that. I think that, again, giving voice to people who usually don't get to talk about their experience.
Well, aside from us chatting about all things Titanic related as we expand these podcast experiences and talking to other Titanic enthusiasts along the way, I think one of the fun fantasies is to imagine, gosh, if I were in that movie, who would I want to play? Or if they were remaking it today, I'd love to see you play Rose's mother. Like, I would love to see you really tightening that corset on her.
You know, Francis, sorry, nothing personal.
So like, there's not a character in the film, Milton Long, but I have my own connection to a real life Titanic passenger named Milton Long. But in encouraging participation with our audience here, if there's the comment section here on the page, who would you want to play? That's what I'm asking you in the audience. Who would you want to play in Titanic, whether it's an existing character in the James Cameron film, or maybe it's just some other character from history, like I have with Milton. But that would be fun. So, like, I encourage people to participate in the comments section and let us know what topics about Titanic you want to talk about in future podcasts. And I came across Titanic is in the news all the time, whether or not it's in the theaters. Titanic is always newsworthy, and I just came across an article which I sent to you, Alexandra, not too long ago, about Isidore and Ida Strauss, who are very famous in Titanic legend because they were the older couple who were offered places in the boat, primarily because, well, she was a woman and he was a first-class older gentleman, so they were to go. And of course, the gentleman, being a gentleman, did not want to take a place before the ladies, and the wife refused to go without him. She'd been with him all those years. So, of course, in the Cameron film, we see them in bed together as the water is rushing in. And this interesting article, the real story was that they were last seen holding hands on deck together before a wave washed over them. His body was recovered. Hers was never recovered. And
didn't she give her place to her maid and
the maid? That's right. The maid.
Fur coat. This will be, you'll need it more than me.
I mean, there are 1,500 of those sad stories about those who perished on the Titanic. But I live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and the Strausses lived around 105th Street and Broadway on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And when they died, their children waited all of, I think, 10 days before they sold the family house. But there is, when you're visiting Manhattan, take some time if you're a Titanic enthusiast and go up to 105th Street and Broadway. And there you will find a small triangular park in the middle of the intersection called Strauss Park. And it's a monument to the memory of the Strausses and those who died aboard the Titanic. And there's a beautiful statue looking into a sort of reflection pond. And the model for that statue has a whole interesting history itself. But Google Strauss Park if you're coming to New York and put it on your list of things to see. Really a must-see for any Titanic enthusiast, I think.
Fantastic. And yes, and I look forward to hearing from all of those characters, because that means I get to research them all and we get to talk about them.
An endless series. Hopefully we can just keep this going, and we want to hear from you what you want to talk about, who you want to hear from. I've had my own experiences with Dr. Robert Ballard. It would be great to catch up with him, the man who found the Titanic. He has not been in the news. I don't know what's going on with him. I hope he's well, and I hope maybe we can score some interesting conversations with folks from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute and keep the Titanic train going.
Full steam ahead.
And if we're not going to go on a cruise together, let's go to Cove, Ireland, which was formerly known as Queensland, the last stop Titanic made before she went out to sea. So it was the last with land. The Titanic Trail is an amazing place to visit if you get to Ireland too. And of course, Belfast is Titanic Central now with their Titanic experience. And oh man,
they make movies there. It's all
we need a road trip. Just pack a life vest.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review. And if you'd like to hear more podcasts like this, hit the subscribe button. For information on where you can see Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries, go to shipofdreamsfilm.com. Titanic Talk is a production of Ship of Dreams Film Limited.